Oppenheimer. So after my review of The Prestige, I thought it was only fair dues that I also talk about the more recent Christopher Nolan epic, biopic, which is all about the life of Oppenheimer. In this film, I was kind of dreading in a way watching, just because, imagining the subject matter and what it's truly about, and thinking back at Christopher Nolan's other films, it kind of seems like it's going to either be somehow weirdly glib about the whole thing, or maybe just very dark and oppressive. What I did find kind of disarming about the movie was that it's actually quite light and quite funny, and did a really good job of sort of encapsulating all the themes and the different moments in his life, in Robert Oppenheimer's life, and giving you sort of the Cliff Notes version of the book it's based on, while not feeling like it's really shortchanging you. I mean, I will say I would have liked a little more in the actual, in the process of the Manhattan Project, of how they actually put it together. Instead, you just get bits and pieces from throughout his life. This one is non-linear, just like all his other films, which works really well in this case, in the sense that you build up to a certain point, which is kind of like the midpoint of the narrative, and then the entire beginning and the rest of the film is kind of centered around that point. So this movie has a really good cast, and it kind of seems like Nolan has moved on from his, the original teams that he worked on. So it's no more Wally Pfizer, no more Hans Zimmer. Now we have Ludwig Göransson, and I'm not actually sure who shot this, but I'm pretty sure it's the same person who did Tenet, and this was actually shot completely in IMAX, I believe. And this is the format. Actually, I saw this in 70mm, so IMAX or 70mm is, I believe, the best way to actually experience this film. I will say also that, this isn't actually necessarily the most compelling case for IMAX. A lot of the sequences are just people and talking, but it does a really good job of turning that high drama into something compelling and suspenseful throughout. It has many different threads, and it isn't glib at all. It actually goes wholeheartedly into the subject matter, and it ends up developing a very compelling thesis that kind of is a condemnation of the atomic bomb, and sort of what it means, in the geopolitical sphere, and for mankind, and for various characters who are, drawn around it. Again, this has a very good crew behind it. The music, the soundtrack is outstanding. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it won the Oscar for that. And even though, so I think there is some visual splendor, obviously, throughout the movie. Some of its, recreations of, different atomic processes, photographed at the, at whatever level they can, with actual existing cameras. Or, I'm sure there was some CGI trickery involved as well. There's obviously a very good recreation of the first atomic blast, and you don't actually see them being used, I think it was Little Boy and Fat Man or something like that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You only hear after the fact about, what happened, and everyone being so happy that it was successful. So a lot of this sort of centers on, the realm of, theoretical physics, nuclear physics, obviously, and just these exciting new fields that had been opened up due to advances in technology, and due in large part, at least this is part of the thesis of this movie, to the anti-Semitism that was going through Europe at the time, thanks to Nazi Germany and all the oppression of the Jewish people, and them seeking refuge and shelter from it, and a fair number of other non-Jewish German or Austrian or wherever scientists also just trying to escape persecution and try to just get to a different place before it was too late. So because of that, the American research division of the Army, I suppose, got a huge boost to it, in terms of rocket development, in terms of actually trying to turn nuclear matter into some sort of weapon. And one thing that I think the movie doesn't really linger on too much, but I found incredibly compelling to think about, is so we basically find out that we have this way of unleashing a great amount of energy all at once, and the only thing we can think to do with it, really, at least at the time, is to make a big bomb. That just says everything about humanity in that one little microcosm. We have the ability to make these great innovations and these great machines, but then all we can think to do with it is kill each other and kill other things. And then obviously after that they made plans and stuff that would use nuclear material as well. So of the cast, Cillian Murphy, I think, is definitely one of the top contenders for, best actor. Florence Pugh also delivers a pretty solid performance. She's not in it nearly enough to, really recommend her that much. She kind of disappears at a certain point. I'm not going to spoil too much, really. Kind of reminds me a lot of ScarJo in The Prestige, actually. She's just kind of there to kind of be like a love interest and kind of motivates the main character and kind of fuel his political allegiances, political beliefs. Maybe add this air of suspicion, did she leak secrets to the Russians? This is very much Cold War paranoia, and you see that played out throughout the movie. This is before necessarily the full extent of the Red Scare, McCarthy era, and all that stuff, but you see sort of the lead up into it. You see how these figures are pulled back in. And a lot of people, I think, going into this movie would probably have assumed that it would end with the successful detonation of the nuclear bombs, but it actually goes a fair amount further past that point to sort of show how Robert Oppenheimer, rethinks his innovation and what he thinks it really means for humanity and all that. So, like I said, this is giving a pretty full portrayal of the man, so that's warts and all. I will say they probably, glammed him up a little bit. First of all, obviously I don't think he was a Hollywood actor or anything, so he probably wasn't all that attractive, really. I bet he looked like a fair bit older than he does in the movie. I don't really know, I didn't look up any photos. And then I would say that obviously a lot of stuff is streamlined, probably characters are melded together, time periods and all that. We do get a few other notable characters and actors throughout. This is kind of like a who's who of Hollywood. We have Matt Damon, we have, various side characters played by, up-and-coming actors. We have Josh Hartnett, who had always said he had regretted not working with Christopher Nolan on Batman Begins, and he actually acquits himself very nicely in this film. We have, I forget his first name, but it's the son of Quaid, Jack Quaid. Let's see, who else? Emily Blunt plays Oppenheimer's wife. She's very good. I know the actor who plays Einstein. I just don't know, very much about him or other things he's been in, but I've seen him in things. I think he's actually been in other Christopher Nolan movies. I think he might have been in The Dark Knight Rises at the beginning, and then I believe he was in Tenet. He was in Dark Knight Rises, but he played one of the prisoners after Batman breaks his back. His performance was quite good as well as Einstein. So this movie kind of has a twist. This has been a while since Christopher Nolan has really done a full-on twist like this. Obviously we have the Memento, The Prestige kind of implied it had a twist, even though I didn't really think it was that much of a twist. There's other movies where they have some key piece of information they're holding to a certain point, and then that kind of recolors the entire rest of the film. In this film, and this is the spoiler, Robert Downey Jr., who's very much playing into his Tony Stark persona, that lawful good, I'm just trying to protect people and look out for my scientists. We find out that he's actually an extremely paranoid and kind of devious, really unpleasant person under the surface, and he is the one who's really been gunning after Oppenheimer after the fact. And at least the case that the movie makes, I don't know how true this is to real life, probably not at all. And actually, if you read more about this, he might have actually had some really good reasons for not liking Robert Oppenheimer. You can look that up and make your own distinctions. But essentially, we have the implication that, he was offended by Oppenheimer, which is true to life, but they built it all around this moment where he meets Einstein at this new research development branch that Robert Downey Jr.'s character is making, and they have some sort of exchange, and then Einstein leaves and doesn't even say anything to Robert Downey Jr., so all throughout the rest of his life, he just assumes that somehow Oppenheimer turned Einstein against him, and holds that against him. And then we also have this thing about a research presentation or conference or a fancy dinner, basically, where Oppenheimer basically made a joke at his expense. And this is also showing, again, the two sides of Oppenheimer. We have the really personable, charismatic face that he can put on, like a mask, and then we have the actual, sort of deeper, socialist, probably leaning, almost like a free spirit sort of thing. He's obviously studied world religions and is very much into, reading them in their own language. We can see he has a facility with different languages and different, extremely right-minded things, right-brained. So anyway, basically we find out that, Robert Downey Jr.'s character has actually been, like, double-crossing him this whole time, and he's the one trying to turn the other scientists against him, after the fact, for embarrassing him. And the entire, like, sort of the beginning and the ending and sort of the framing device, and very much this movie is also owing a lot of debts to, Citizen Kane and movies like that, where we have, like, people interviewing other characters and kind of trying to fill in the blanks about who was this person. He's still alive at the time of the movie, but that's kind of what it is. And what we end up with is a very compelling portrait. Again, just to say what the very end of the film is, so we go back to that moment by the lake, and we find out basically that Einstein is saying, they're talking about this equation that Oppenheimer had brought to him years earlier, and it all hinges, I think Nolan's original fascination with this story probably draws back from this. And by the way, this is the first movie he's entirely written by himself, as far as I know, in a really long time. And, like, usually he has his brother or some other co-author, like Jonathan Nolan. But basically we find out that there was a less than 1% probability that if they had tried to use a nuclear device, it would either, work as they predicted, like 99.9999% of the time, or it might have a chance of setting the atmosphere on fire and creating an unstoppable, chain reaction of every hydrogen atom, exploding essentially, or imploding, or however they put it in the movie. So basically he's asking him, what did you decide? Did you destroy the world or not? And Oppenheimer's like, I think I did destroy the world. He doesn't put it quite like that, he puts it better. But basically what he's saying is, to really dumb it down, basically he's taking on the entire moral weight of the creation of this bomb, what it means for the rest of the world. The Soviets get it quickly after, and then every other, country that kind of had access to the science to be able to put it together, and just, kicks off the Cold War like crazy, and all this paranoia, and the fear that the bombs are going to drop tomorrow. And we even see this visually depicted throughout the film, where we have little clips of, like, Oppenheimer sitting in, like, a V2 bomber, and you see all the like missiles start flying, and the implication that the Earth is just gonna annihilate itself at some point. And that's kind of the chilling note that this movie is building towards and built around, and very much the take-home message for the viewer. Not very cheerful at all. I did not do Barbenheimer, and I honestly can't understand how you could, just because, like, the ending is so bleak. You kind of just want to go home and drink some cocoa or take a hot bath or something, just kind of like make yourself feel a little bit better. So yeah, that's the entire film basically, is, the paranoia and him trying to defend himself, and you learning more about his past. You get some little insights into how he was as a student. He almost poisoned a professor because of a dispute about trying to see Niels Bohr give a presentation. And he actually meets Niels Bohr, who is, I think played very well by Kenneth Branagh. And then you also see throughout how he is as a professor. He's very much kind of like, he's not like the most proactive professor, but just like the ideas he's putting out there and the people he brings in, like he gets these little like tight-knit communities everywhere he goes. We have sort of his like leftist friends, many of which who do turn out to be like sort of sending information to the other side, very much communist leaning, communist sympathizing, all these things. So you can kind of see, and also his brother is like deeply involved in the movement. So you can kind of see how, all these forces were kind of colluding against him. Emily Blunt is there throughout, kind of like aware of his philandering and like feeling crappy about it, obviously. A very contentious thing about like the baby. I just remember the scene where basically he comes home and she's like, basically like, can you help with the baby at all? And he's like, no. And then he tries to ask some friends to take care of the baby. I don't know. It all seemed very odd, and I'd have to like learn more about that whole situation. So not just condemn him as like a terrible father or whatever. So yeah, eventually Matt Damon recruits him, and he helps recruit all these other people, played by these notable actors. A lot of like foreign actors, or at least actors doing accents, which is really interesting. You see how this is really like a global effort to try to outpace the Nazis, and throughout you get the very high sense of the stakes. First they're trying to beat Germany to building the bomb, just so they don't start dropping atomic bombs on cities and devastating the world and just win the war that way. And then second, they kind of want to prove their technological superiority to like Russia and other nations. And this essentially does cement the U.S. as a premier world power after this point, and after World War II. And then third, they do want to sort of end the war decisively. Japan refuses to surrender because of cultural beliefs, so they kind of see this as the only way to like decisively be like, the war's over. You need to surrender, really. Although you do often wonder, like, why did they drop it on two major, like, civilian populated cities and not, like, army bases or literally any other thing? Or nowhere populated at all, just like to show we have this bomb. But anyway, that's what they went with, and it's terrible for everyone. So I will say again that this isn't, like, the most visual movie, really. Like, there are a few really interesting sequences that are beautifully photographed, and the whole movie is, like, got great cinematography. Again, I think it's the person who shot Tenet. I'm not sure the name. But there's only like a really like short amount of sequences that kind of are built around that visual splendor. The rest of it is like, again, very tense and very like dynamic shots of people talking in like into rooms and questioning each other's allegiances. So yeah, if you can't see it in 70mm or IMAX, you can probably see it in HD or 4K depending on your TV setup at home very nicely, or you can see it on a cell phone as Nolan intended. Just kidding. So yeah, I thought this was a really excellent movie. My fears and my trepidations are washed away. I think this is Nolan making a very clear and firm political statement, which is kind of interesting considering how apolitical he's tried to be throughout the rest of his career, to the point of like people can watch The Dark Knight and come away with like completely opposite political takes. So I think it is very bold of him to just like state outright some of his beliefs, through other characters, obviously. The writing is excellent, the dialogue is excellent. I didn't detect many of those like kind of clunky beats that you sometimes end up with. The acting is amazing, just a great cast throughout. Music, spectacular. Some really nice shots of landscapes, because a lot of this obviously takes place in New Mexico. The whole secondary, tertiary cast are great as well. Yeah, definitely go catch this one if it's still in theaters where you are, or just wait for a video on demand. Throw it up on projector if you have one. Whatever you have, it'll still be worthwhile, because this is really harkening back to Memento, Prestige, that era of Nolan, where the story is like the main thing. The ideas are the compelling thing. The interpersonal, relationships and the obsession, and people kind of like rethinking their lives and like questioning and doubting. These are really the building blocks of what I think makes Nolan great. The spectacle is very nice, up to Inception. I don't think people really associated that with him. And Inception comes out, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, he's this big guy. Obviously he does some things in the Batman movies too, but nothing that like, whoa. So yeah, I think it's kind of an unfair rap that he's been saddled with since then, when really going back to his earlier films, they're very much about the ideas and the dialogue and the kind of creepy noir feel of it, which this movie has in spades. So definitely check it out. Highly recommended. Really beautiful, dynamic, suspenseful. Surprisingly funny in parts. And also just like a very chilling ending. Very much that Nolan mic drop moment that he's like very much specialized in throughout many of his films. Okay, for positive takes, this has been my review of Oppenheimer.